Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Edward Tyson on the line, and he's CEO of Synergy Consulting. Edward, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
All right, so a lot to cover today and excited to do this. So for the people that have been listening to this show for a long, long time, you know I love promoting authors. I love promoting books. And in this case, we're going to do a deep dive into leadership SOPs and what that means. And then Ed's book, From Expert to Executive, Mastering the SOPs of Leading. So we'll kick this show off and get it started the way that we do them all with our Mission Matters Minute. So Ed, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Ed, what mission matters to you?
Well, thanks again for having me, Adam. And I'll tell you, as I've been thinking over that question, the answer is pretty clear to me. It's to engage millions of more leaders than I could through my work with my boutique consulting and coaching firm, and engage those leaders in the process of leading, mainly by connecting them to their mission as leaders. And so that's what I'm focused on, and what basically the leadership SOPs was designed to do. And my book is kind of the best mechanism I had to speak with a louder voice to a larger number of people.
It's awesome. Love having mission-based entrepreneurs and executives on the line to share why they do what they do, like what excites them, what motivates them to go out into the market and make a difference. So great having you on. And before we get into the book, and of course I want to know more about Synergy Consulting, but before we get into that, like how did you get started in this path to really helping people?
Well, sure. Well, my first shot at helping people was 17 years old. I signed the papers, or rather, I begged my mother to sign the papers to ship me off to Marine Corps boot camp. I wasn't even old enough to do it myself, is the truth. And so I left early from high school, graduated a couple of weeks early, and shipped off to Marine Corps boot camp at Parris Island.
Wow, what an amazing story. So after mom's approval, where'd it go from there?
Yeah, sure. So I actually joined the Marine Corps Reserve. So at the same time, I also started school at Penn State University. Started out as a criminal justice major, but after spending some time, got pulled out of school, sent off to Cuba with the Marine Corps. And after spending some time on the shores of Cuba, I rethought my life and my mission, and went back and changed my major to philosophy. Later completed that degree, and then followed it up with a degree in organizational psychology, and then started a career in healthcare, and spent a number of years working my way up through the ladder, became a vice president of process improvement, and then vice president of strategy, reporting to the CEO of a publicly traded healthcare company. And as our strategy became to take that company private, I helped put that deal together and help with the integration, and then made myself available to the industry, as they say. And I had what I like to call liquid courage, which was, as a young man at the time, I'd never been so liquid in terms of my assets. And so I had the courage to start my own thing. And that was about 10 years ago that I began Synergy Consulting and started helping, organizations, teams, and people make strategic transformations.
So you jumped off the cliff. That's what I always call it. I'm like, yeah, you get out there, you do it, and it's a difference going from corporate America per se to entrepreneurship. I like to tell people like it means that you no longer get days off. It's fine. Sounds like you're signing up for it at the beginning, but the entrepreneurial path, it's full of its ups, downs, sideways, in betweens, right? So it can be bumpy at times. What would you tell? And I just for the younger audience for a moment, we'll of course get further into your actual content. But I like to stay on maybe when you were first starting for just a moment longer. What would you tell some of the newer budding entrepreneurs that are maybe kind of in a similar situation to your shoes, where they're thinking that they have some experience under their belt and they're thinking about going out there and starting their own thing? What kind of advice would you give to that group?
Well, I think the advice I often give to people who ask me about starting their own thing is to take the focus off of the expertise that they're looking to deliver and think about how they're going to go to market, how they are going to be capitalized as a business, how are they capitalized as an individual, what kind of risk can they bear, and how are they, once they understand how they are going to go to market, how are they going to go to market with a bang and loud enough and broad enough to develop the kind of business flow and cash flow to survive. So I think a lot of people focus on what am I going to provide? Am I qualified and good enough to do it? And they don't need a lot of help with that. But many times we do not put the focus on the business itself. And as a result, can put ourselves and our families sometimes in peril as we have false starts or no starts at all.
Great advice. All right, so switching it up a bit, I do want to spend time on your book. So from expert to executive, mastering the SOPs of leading. What was the inspiration for this?
Well, really, it was me and my business focused primarily on broad organizational transformations early on, and just a little bit of this stuff called executive coaching. And as I began to do more and more of that work, it was just super fulfilling. However, as I looked back on some of the work I was performing, I was a bit frustrated. I was frustrated that perhaps I wasn't any better than anyone else and just getting decent results, not awesome results, not better results, but just good results. And that really bothered me. So I started on a process of thinking, well, how can I really differentiate myself in a crowded marketplace? Do more of this work, frankly, so I could de-emphasize some of the larger strategic transformational work that I was doing and put the focus on these more personal transformations. So as I was kind of in that process, I, really stumbled upon a renewed clarity in my own thoughts about the fundamental underpinnings of leadership.
Can you give us and obviously, we can only cover so much. And I definitely recommend that my audience go out, pick up a copy of this book. We'll put links in the show notes so that you can just open up the show notes, click on the link and head right on over and pick up a copy. But I do want to get into some of the content just to get my audience hooked so they can go grab a copy. All right, Ed, so I want to go further into the book. I guess maybe just as a starting point, and we'll dig deeper, maybe just give us a flavor for how the book is laid out. Tell us a little bit more about the structure.
Absolutely. Well, basically, in the introduction, I talk about how I arrived at the leadership SOPs model and what that model is. But the 10 chapters of the book are actually a fictional case study based on many characters applying that information or really discovering it for themselves.
And so the format of it, I get it. So the format of the book as a reader's going through it is the idea that they're kind of like alongside on this journey of the case study, or like let's go a step further on this one.
Absolutely. So basically it's based on a fictitious biotech company and the founders of that company, along with several key leaders in it, understanding how they need to overcome their reluctance to focus on leaders, their natural, depending on which character we're talking about, their natural proclivity is either focused on being a scientist or focused on being a business person, but not being anchored in 100% leadership.
And I guess going a little bit further into the model and of how the book was laid out. Like, tell me a little bit more about the model and what you're teaching in leadership in the book.
Got it. Sure. Well, first off, as I tried to problem solve for myself, what is the best way to help develop leaders? I started to recognize that the number one failing I was seeing is most leadership training puts skills and styles before systems. And what I mean by that is we often focus our development activities on interpersonal skills, for instance. So I might try to train somebody how to be a better communicator. And the problem with that is that you can become a better communicator, but not utilize that communication skill in the process of leading. And so if my development training doesn't focus on what the heck the process of leading is, you don't know how to get in it. And that communication skill I've taught you might just help you with your membership, not your leadership. So I started to think about that further. And as a process improvement guy, I thought I had it at the process of leading. And so I started running around telling people, you need to develop your leadership SOPs, your systems or processes for leading. But what that led me was to an understanding that there was a second question behind that. What do I aim those processes at? What do I aim those leadership SOPs at?
What kind of feedback have you gotten from, and I don't mean from clients, I mean just so far on the book and everything else, because I love the concept, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. So leadership SOPs, I think it puts a lot of structure around leadership. I think it also is it's definitely brand aligned to your mission of improving the lives of many leaders out there, as you mentioned. What kind of feedback have you gotten on the book and just so far?
Well, the feedback I get most often is the kind of shock of the simplicity of the overall message. And that is when people hear leadership SOPs, they first think of standard operating procedures. And on the surface, that's what it is. Going deeper, though, those SOPs are also reflecting what I call the work of leading, which is focusing on how to structure, operate, and perfect communities of effort. So there's a double entendre there in the use of the SO and P to stand not just for your standard operating procedures for leading, but your standard operating procedures for structuring, operating, and perfecting communities of effort. And so the feedback usually is tied with, wow, I was prepared to think about improving my habits as a leader when I saw that leadership SOPs. That's the number one thing people typically associate with the concept when they hear it. But the fact that it helps them explore the work of leading and get a broader and deeper understanding of that actual work, not the skills that help us do better, but the actual work of leading. That's the thing that typically touches people the most.
I want to spend a little bit of time on Persynergy Consulting. So tell us a little bit more about your firm and what you do, please.
Sure. We have 3 different focus areas, and they're all around who's the audience of the work we're doing. So as I mentioned before, the organizational perspective is where we did a lot of our work at the founding point of the firm. And that is large organizational transformations that look like either generating the strategy or translating strategy into structure. That is rearranging the chess pieces on the board for better success, or looking at helping to implement process improvements or technologies and supporting the enterprise-wide change management process. So that was kind of our core area, the organizational level. And then the longer we were in operation, the more we started moving into 2 other tiers, one being teams, assessing and developing leadership teams. And the last one being this area of executive coaching that I found such love for, which is, of course, working one-on-one with leaders to help them improve their approach to leadership development.
Is there and I know leadership overall is a theme, is there a type of clients that you find tend to get the most value from working with you and your team? And what I mean by that is maybe by size. Do you only work at the enterprise? Do you work with some small business, mid-market? Are you industry agnostic, or do you specialize in one industry versus another? Give us a little bit of an idea of that, please, because at the end of this, I'm going to give you the opportunity to leave contact info, and I want to make sure that the right types of organizations and individuals do follow up to connect.
Absolutely. Well, it really varies by the service. So in the strategy development side, we are talking about relatively small to medium-sized organizations under a couple of $100 million in revenue. But on the structure side, that's where we're everywhere to the Fortune top 5 that engage our small little firm because of our niche on the organizational structure side. And then as it relates to the executive coaching part of our business, that's all across the board, everywhere from construction to automotive manufacturing, companies that are heard of in the last 5 news stories you read of, all the way to companies you haven't and never will hear of, tend to engage us for that. And in terms of who, it tends to be, just as the book title would suggest, those leaders who are somewhere on the journey from expert to executive. So they tend to be, their backgrounds tend to be, they're either lawyers or scientists or technologists or engineers, So very focused expertise. Many times on the global stage, they've been recognized for their expertise in a particular subject matter area, but it's not leadership. It's not people. And so we help them understand that the purpose of leading is to cultivate communities of effort that are willing, capable, and sustainable.
Fantastic. All right, Ed. So final question here today, and it's a big one. Now, I know there are many, many things that messages and takeaways from your book, but what is one of the major ones that you hope that all of the readers that pick up a copy do walk away with?
Sure. I think we first discover leadership when we embrace objectives that are larger than we can achieve alone. And so fundamentally, leadership is a process of social organization that's meant to yield willing, because if they're not willing, then it's not leadership we're wielding. Capable, because we can't just make them willing or inspire them, but not help them be capable. And sustainable, because if they're not sustainable, they won't remain willing or capable for long.
Oh, well said. Awesome stuff, Ed. Well, first off, it's been great having you on the show, and excited to bring this content to my audience and get your expertise. And also definitely want everybody to go pick up a copy of that book. So if somebody is listening to this and they want to pick up a copy, or they want to also engage your firm for some of the other services you mentioned, what's the best way for people to connect?
The absolute easiest way is to visit our Leadership SOPs website at leadershipsops.com, or look me up and engage with me on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's awesome. And we'll put all of those notes all those links in the show notes so that people can just click on it and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters, we're a platform that's all about bringing on entrepreneurs and executives and experts and having them share why they do what they do, like what gets them excited to go out there into the market and really to make a difference out there. If that's the type of content that you're into and you like, we definitely welcome you to hit that subscribe button, because we have many more mission-based individuals coming up on the line, and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Ed, really, it has been a pleasure. I'm wishing you much more continued success with your book.
Thank you so much, Adam. Really appreciate you having me today.